Good afternoon, everybody. This is a time-shifted variant of presentation I'm making for DITA-OT Day. What I'm going to talk about today is DITA-OT plugins. So let's get on with the show. Let's start by showing what I was showing at DITA-OT Day last year. In Rotterdam, I was showing a rather boring presentation about unit tests, and I spiced it up by adding in pictures of cats coming up onto the screen whilst I was doing some processing. Now, as you probably realise, it is not easy to get visual parts into a processing engine, and therefore it is necessary to put in a few tricks. There's actually a variant on this, in that it doesn't have to be pictures of cats. It can also be illustrations from the famous XKCD Randall Munro comic, which puts, again, various random things up on the screen just so that it's a little bit less boring. Once that disappears from the screen, I'll get back to the presentation. Right, so as I said, the idea behind this is that we're going to display something onto screen, but the idea of this whole presentation is to describe what actually needs to go into a simple DITA-OT plugin. You can see on the right there's a file structure. You've got your basic build, which is your ANT scripting, and you've got a library which is used for the visualization. This is part of the stuff which is missing deliberately missing from the standard DITA build. I've got a plugin XML, which obviously is the thing which is driving our system, and a small series of JavaScript-based resource files, as well as messaging which says whether it's running or not, so I can see that in the debug. Now, if you go onto GitHub, you will see that ANT scripting is not considered to be a programming language, and indeed, if I didn't split out these resource files as shown, it would say I had no programming language for this particular plugin. You can see it's 100% JavaScript because all the cool kids are using JavaScript. And what we can see here is that you can augment the basic properties of ANT by adding in additional stuff to do the bits which ANT does badly or can't do. So in this particular case, we've got 4 lines of JavaScript just saying, "Oi, get the a property, get a random number, and manipulate a string." That's all you need to do. Let's have a look at the code itself. If I have a look at the plugin XML is very, very simple. It just has these 2 trans types, so I can do things quickly. But I can also add in this on the depend preprocess pre action. If I just swap in the XKCD rather than the cats. XKCD is famous for being relevant to any situation you like, as far as any subject, because it's all random math and what have you. So I put to spice up the presentation. I put in some random XKCD slides as well. So let's depend preprocess pre occurs before you do anything else. Now, obviously, in order to do something like put up a splash screen, you want to do it right at the beginning, and it's one of several points you might want to put in for when you're creating a small plugin. Plugin's just doing one particular thing. So if we look into the splash screen here, you can see the structure. I tend to put my important things at the bottom of my build file. You can see that I've got these direct build targets, which will be DITA to XKCD and DITA to cats, where the name of the transform is what you've got. But you can also use this xkc.splash or cats.splash, which would then go off and do something as part of the process, which is what it's called from the preprocess pre. It's a fairly simple little plugin. You can get all this code directly from GitHub, so I don't need to go into necessarily full details. But what it does is, in summary, is it gets information from an API, and then you've got a problem. The problem you've got is that you need to be able to retrieve part of that file. So we then go on to the next bit where we have a script tag which will actually read information from that. The script tags are all in the resources folder. So if I go for cats, for example, it just is reading information direct from an XML file. It would be possible to process this using an XSLT transform, take out the element you want, then read that file in using ANT, but it's a bit clunky. And perhaps more importantly, for the XKCD, where you've got a JSON-based API, you can't do this very easily with XML. Now, I've just done a substring, just try to get information directly from the file, but it doesn't necessarily have to be done that way. You can use JSON parsing in more modern versions of DITA-OT because the Rhino engine is now supports JSON parsers. We'll come down to a bit later. Sorry, that's it. So. In order to invoke anything here, you need to have a script element. Script is very simple. It is a case of just do this for this particular attribute, do that. And the other trick here is that when you are creating a plugin ideally does something and usually needs to invoke another library. In this case, it's just launching that splash screen, and that can be done quite nicely through Java. So that's the first part of this. Let's move on to something a little bit more in depth. Second plugin, I'll show you that. There's readthedocs plugin. Okay. Oops, there we go. So readthedocs is a format which is available online. It's 99% of the way the same as the existing Markdown plugin. The Markdown plugin is now putting things with a index file. And the index file is near enough what I want for my system. It's the actual output is a YAML file as opposed to the index file. So what we need to do here is to take the a standard existing transform and extend it. If you look at the stuff on screen, I'm taking I'm doing a bit of init initialization, following the same sort of standards as all the other plugins. Then I'm running standard DITA to Markdown. Then I add in things like adding in the CSS and things like that. But you can see the structure of this plugin is a little bit more complicated in that I've now added in an ANT lib. An ANT lib is effectively a way of hiving off functions, library functions, and you can initialize it using a type def, as you can see on screen. Just say include these functions, and then you can call it as if it were one of the standard things. So in this case, create readthedocs is one of the standard screens. What the output looks like, if I go into here, is this YAML file open with, say, text app, which you can see it looks very, very similar to the output you get from the Markdown XML. It's just it's been indented somewhat. So what I've done is I've changed this to have some manipulation. You can use JavaScript to manipulate an output file quite easily by as I said, adding in one of these functions, and then you can use the existing file utils read fully function to read in a file, do various things to it. In this case, manipulating it using JavaScript, and then you can do a write using the echo function. The idea there is that you have an ANT echo, which is created as a task, and you just created this task and then push out another file. And let's move on to the third example. So we've done one where we've done stuff at the beginning, and one which we've done stuff at the end. Let's move on to something else which does a complete new transform. Move on to the Prettier plugin. If we have a look at a random file of DITA, you'll find that over time the file becomes difficult for humans to read. It's not designed for humans to read. It's supposed to be an XML input. You can see all these P tags are misaligned, and you need to be able to reformat this if you want to be able to read it, particularly if you're doing things like the validation where it says problem on line X. If this was just in a single line string, which is perfectly possible if that was the way you were doing easy DITA, then it would be a case that you'd say error on line 1, which is useless to everybody. Now, you can't just use a standard XML tidier here, because you have things like code blocks. Code blocks are actually white space dependent, and you can't just indent this because you'd end up indenting the code block itself. But you want to work out which things like code pH and what have you should be left in line, and which things like P and body should actually be considered as block level elements. So let's see what I can do here. I'll get this one running, which is pretty-dita. And go back to the main screen, which is that one. Okay, so first thing you can do when you're running this Prettier plugin is you want to tidy things up. So you can do 90% of the formatting using XSLT. XSLT will allow you to do what's known as an identity transform, so where you can push stuff in and it'll take a complete copy out. If you add on to that the ability to indent the first line, you'll get a raw first pass of this indenter. Indeed, this is what the various things which will format your XML, just standard XML on screen, do, but they won't get everything nicely lined up. What happens then is we can use JavaScript, which is the 51%, so this still counts as a JavaScript-based plugin, to do the remaining bits of tidying. If we have a look at the which is this tidy white space function, once again we have a series of resources, and there's a small problem we have here, in that because this particular plugin is not processing processed DITA, it's processing the raw DITA files, it's therefore got all the document type headers. And indeed, you'll want to keep all the document type headers because you want to output proper DITA. So it is necessary to get around this by supplying a DTD. I'm not actually supplying a real DTD, I'm supplying a fake DTD, just saying I've got a file here which has got something, so I can go off and do what's necessary. Go back to the screen. If I have a quick look at the Prettier, where's it gone? pretty-dita. So what have we got here? If we look at the file here, all that we're doing here, and you notice the cats came up. The reason why the cat came up is because I've got this DITA depends preprocess pre. This means that when you call this particular target, which is pretty-dita, the name of the DITA-OT Pretty-dita, it will do that as a first step. Thereafter, having done the initialization, we need to prettify our files, which means we can just go through and amend the file as necessary. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. Or what I need to do here, as you saw the title white space, is I need to be able to go in and look at a set of files and then apply a function on each one of those files. This is where I've added in a JavaScript-based iterator, which means that I can take a file set from my screen, which I'll just show that bit again. Actually, the file set is here. Yes, so the file set consisting of all my DITA files and all my DITA maps. And then I can say for each file I have got, which I have now put my output, I can get something, I can then tidy it up as necessary. Once again, I've got the files in here, and if I look at that topics basic, I think it was called, basic features, open with text edit. What do we get coming in here? Oh, that won't hurt. I'm going to do something else. Oh, it's HTML, that's why. Topics, where's it gone? Okay, markdown data, blah blah blah. So which one did I run? I just okay, file failure on the error. So just pause that for a second. Okay, got it, found it. What has happened is that the file basic usage data file, which I showed earlier, has been updated in situ and is now nicely aligned. You can see that the paragraphs are all indented. You can see where the section block occurs, and you can see where the topic ends. So the takeaway here is that you can use JavaScript here for string manipulation, changing your white space and your lines. You can do it for the file manipulation because you're writing the files in situ, and indeed you can do this file iteration. Now, it is important to understand that macros themselves can call other macros. So you can have a nested series of actions. You know, have this series of files, do this on this file, do this on the second file, do this on the third file, and so on. The final plugin for this particular section is a code highlighting plugin. This is, according to GitHub, 64% XSLT, but that's actually a misnomer because I've excluded all the JavaScript files which are held in that components directory, and there are lots and lots of them. This particular plugin adds in code highlighting. I'll just get that one running. So it uses the XML task. XML task is an ANT library which has got another plugin. It's you can include it as a dependency, which means that you're able to look inside the actual XML of processed files. This particular plugin runs on the depend pre-process post part. Now, what that means is that you've already run the initial processing. You've got a set of rough DITA files, and you haven't yet run an additional XSLT transform to output your PDF or your HTML or whatever. Now, this means that I can look inside these raw files and then manipulate an element which is either a code PH or a code block and add in additional stuff. Let's see what the output came up with. The output has got workspace data out. That's what we want. Document PDF. Let's see what's in here. As you can see, I've got fairly normal looking text. However, all the code bits have been properly code highlighted. So you can see this is a bit of JavaScript, and it's got the var in blue, and it's got the require in various different colors. Now, it is perfectly possible to do this in HTML as well. And indeed, there is a plugin. Part of the plugin will add in the CSS for that. You can also change the highlighting, but this isn't just stuck using JavaScript. You can see it does HTML, or it does XML, or indeed it does 150 other additional languages on this highlighting. How does that work? There is a useful library called Prism, which is why this is called the Prism plugin, and that does all this code highlighting on the fly during when a web page loads, which is fine if you've got JavaScript enabled, and obviously won't work on your PDF. So we need to be able to iterate through these code blocks and then read in the library itself. Now, what I've done is I've placed the library into a temporary file, and I can append the whichever languages it has found into this file, so it will be able to process more and more different types of language. I'll just have a quick look at the XML in there. The processing is just one very deep call here, which is this XML task job. But the important bit is down here is that we run this prism.js function, which is all that I'm doing with my my JavaScript, and that is a resource, as you'd expect, which is just an invocation in JavaScript, and then replacing your whatever would have been the HTML with valid elements of DITA. So obviously, I don't want to load in all 152 languages. I can therefore only add in each language as it is needed, and then every time you go a bit of code, it has to process this again, so watch out. And that, in summary, are 4 different areas you can add in JavaScript into your plugins. I would ask for any questions, but they'll have to be in the notes below. Thank you very much.